Okay, yes, second news topic of the week, as John was alluding to there, we got our first look at Battlefield 6 multiplayer gameplay. And a trailer went out along with some gameplay sessions. The trailer just looks absolutely fantastic. Just complete carnage from start to finish. Looking absolutely tremendous. Kind of like a distillation of how you would imagine Battlefield to be in a kind of like, idealized scenario. And there it is. John, thoughts?
Wow, yeah. I mean, one, Fred Durst is back, which is, he's in there. No, really. So watching through the whole presentation and everything, it's very interesting to see what they're doing here because it's very clear that they took a lot of the feedback from the last three games or so, especially the last two, to heart. Those games were not that popular. I think they did okay, but the Battlefield community largely rejected what they were doing, especially with 2042. And this to me looks like a proper return to form in a way. Like they're back. There's four classes, right? You get the main classes. They're bringing back classic modes properly. They're focusing on a more realistic, serious military setting without like crazy, like Call of Duty. It's become almost a parody at this point because it's chasing the Fortnite stuff. Like it is funny to see like the Terminator and Beavis and Butthead running around, but it really kills the vibes. And Battlefield seems to be saying, all right, we reject that now. This is more like a serious stage. And that's cool. I think that works. Battlefield does not need to get goofy in that sense. But the big thing that really stands out here is that they're going all in on destruction. Not the Levolution stuff like Battlefield 4 and such, where, there was like a scripted event that would occur like once per match and it was awesome looking, but it was ultimately very like scripted and simple in that sense. Like, oh, this thing's happening, now the level changes in this way. Where the destructive here seems far more organic, and when they show the sledgehammer come out, it really sort of sets this statement of intent, where it's like, hey, this isn't just about like a cool visual effect or changing the level layout. This is about the destruction of buildings and objects factoring directly into the gameplay. Burrowing through walls, smashing down through the ceiling, to like, get people like surprise attacks, tanks blowing up the entire like sides of buildings, revealing the skeleton within, like everything just crumbling around you. That stuff is awesome. And I think that is something that a lot of people are going to be excited to see come back. And and it's not just that it's cool conceptually, it looks cool, right? Like the actual destruction's happening, like the way it's like actually executed, the crumbling of buildings, the particle effects, everything. I love how they very specifically showed the drone with the C4 on it fly into the bridge, and then he explodes it there, which, that actually was something that was people would do back in Battlefield in the old days. And then the way it actually breaks apart, it looks freaking phenomenal. Or there's that scene shortly after where they zoom in on a corpse falling and hitting the floor. And I'm curious to see if this plays out in gameplay. You can see the spent shell casings all laying around on the floor. And when he hits the floor, they all kind of like jump up a little bit from the weight of his impact. So it seems to me like there's just this attention to detail on granular things now that is kind of what I think people will want to see here. Plus, it's it's the next Frostbite looking game, and as usual, it looks great. The rendering of the characters, the environments, the particle effects, explosions, everything is top tier. It doesn't. I'm not seeing any evidence of like ray tracing features in here, so I'm suspecting that they've either completely cut that or taken a different approach. But I mean, in the last game, it was literally just like RTAO at this point and not that great. And by the way, I actually was recently playing the last Battlefield game just out of curiosity again, because it's been a while. I mean, it still plays okay, but man, it feels so Spartan and just like old in a way. Like it's very strange. Like in my mind, it's like, this looks significantly worse than like Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5. Like it just doesn't work that well. And this feels like a more return to form to DICE being on the top a frontier of high-end visuals in these military games. So, and of course, they had that whole presentation in the auditorium where they talked about things. There's a campaign coming back, which is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody loved them, but I actually was quite a fan of the Battlefield 4 campaign. It was fairly linear and scripted in many ways, but there was some cool stuff in there. And it was fun. And I'm happy that they're actually taking another shot at that.
Absolutely.
So that's cool. And I guess it's Vince Zampella of Call of Duty fame, right? Who's like the director on the game now. So that's pretty wild, right? They got somebody with a very strong track record of making amazing first person shooter games. Of course from Respawn as well, right? So like Titanfall 2 and everything. So that's, I don't know. It feels to me like everything's lining up in a way where like they might actually have like a proper serious hit on their hands this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're doing the things that people wanted from Battlefield again.
Yeah, I think it's just the concepts that, literally anything can happen at any point, and it's all driven by that physics engine. And it's great that the goofy stuff still happens, right? Because it's kind of just highly amusing. And I just don't think they fumbled it at all. I was expecting the trailer to end and then suddenly introducing Nicki Minaj or something like that.
Yeah, thank God they're not doing that.
But no, it was just faultless from start to finish.
The humor is very subtle in fun ways, like the sledgehammer having knock knock written on it, right? Like it's like, okay. That's the kind of humor that works here in Battlefield.
It clearly looked like PC, so the extent to which it scales to console is, I guess, still up in the air. But fingers crossed there. Oliver, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought to me this reminded me a lot of another older Battlefield game that was fairly instrumental in my earlier years, which is Battlefield 3. In part because of the smaller environments, the focus on cityscapes, the more Middle Eastern locales. It seems more infantry focused, and that's an area where Battlefield 3 really took the series in a bit of a different direction. And since they've kind of subsequently expanded the scope, especially in Battlefield 2042, which had these gigantic 128-player matches that looked very Spartan, like John said, because they were trying to accommodate this massive player count. And that did not work out so well. But I do like they've brought back the classic 4-class structure as well here. Obviously in 2042, they brought it more towards a hero class structure. That was not so warmly received. I think this is a much better choice. And even the game's visuals look reminiscent of Battlefield 3, like the kind of lens flares, the dirt building up everywhere, the smoke, the kind of desaturated bluish tan hues of the concrete and the dirt. It just feels very like a 2011 Battlefield 3. That feels cool. Even the music, which kind of has that symphonic electronic trailer music sound to it, sounds very different from the kind of glitchy, bizarre Battlefield 2042 music. Much more reminiscent of Battlefield 3 in my opinion. I do like the destruction. I think it's still state-based destruction as opposed to necessarily completely physics-based destruction.
Right.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So I don't think it's changed fundamentally, but when you look at the level of debris and that kind of feeling of destruction, and even things like how the smoke and dust hang in the air for a long time after things come down, I think that's a very clear distinction between those older Battlefield titles. It looks very different. It looks more granular as well. I think it is still that state-based kind of system there, but that's pretty cool. Visually, I think it's mostly positive. It looks, you kind of look at this and it looks a little bit like the older Battlefield titles, but with much greater detail, much improved pyrotechnics. It kind of reads plausibly like a real environment, where if you go back to 2042, that game had these huge maps, right, set in city centers, but they didn't really look like it. They looked totally clean, totally sterile, even though it's this place with a ton of explosions and stuff going on. There wasn't any rubble around. There wasn't any kind of dust or newspapers or things like this. It looked very sterile. This looks like a real lived-in city, and I think they've just nailed that feeling. My only kind of exception to that relatively strong appraisal of the graphics and what they've done here, is like, just in some moments, I kind of saw lighting that looked like a little bit video gamey in some places, like in shadowed regions, sometimes indoor environments. Sometimes you see like that SSAO a little bit poking through in kind of a video gamey way. Nothing too bad, but just something that, maybe indicates there's not like a huge RT lighting solution on display here necessarily. But, for a multiplayer game that moves very quickly, it has to support 60 FPS gameplay on, consoles, mainstream PCs. I think that's totally fine. And presumably they achieve good image quality. Battlefield 2042 had, I think, very good image quality on consoles as well, with I think what was checkerboarding at the time. I don't know if they'd adopt the checkerboarding technique here as well, or if they would resort to something like FSR potentially. Obviously, the Dead Space games used FSR from EA, as well as Dragon Age: The Veilguard last year. So there is some precedent there, or if they'd roll their own solution or something. But yeah, just a few thoughts. I think this is shaping up to be a pretty cool game. Very reminiscent of Battlefield 3, which I quite like. And just looks quite polished. And apparently they've been prototyping this game and playtesting it much more extensively than prior Battlefield games, which is kind of cool. So they've actually been working on this game and iterating on the gameplay in a way much earlier in the development cycle than is typical with these kinds of games. So I think that's a cool little detail as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the only thing from my perspective that caught my eye from the trailer that I was a bit sort of 50-50 about, the post-processing on it kind of looked different to all the gameplay that I've seen, which was kind of interesting. Also, there were some frame drops in that trailer, and I was thinking to myself, if you've got frame drops in a trailer that's designed to showcase the game, how does that reflect on actual performance? But then you can go and look at there's various sort of extended gameplay clips on YouTube now, and it actually looks fine there. Yeah. So I think maybe it was just either they didn't throw enough horsepower at the trailer, or the trailer was simply just everything ramps up to sort of maximums there. But I think, the takeaway is, especially when you see the gameplay, that Battlefield is back. It's back to the classic formula, but refined and improved in ways that you would expect from, modern hardware. Do get what you're saying about the lighting though, Oliver. I agree with you 100% there. Mm-hmm. The game's kind of moved on since, real-time global illumination, ray trace global illumination has come on the scene. But again, maybe it's simply to ensure good performance across the board. And, but who knows what will happen in the future. But certainly, looks pretty cool.
That kind of creates interesting problems though, right, Rich? Like most multiplayer games are focused on performance. Mm-hmm. But you could argue that Fortnite, for instance, has the Lumen GI path, right? But not every version, you don't have to use it. Not every version actually has that either for performance reasons, which means they have to maintain a Lumen GI version and a software, not ray traced lighting version as well, which adds additional stress, I guess, to the development team side of things. And since they're not selling an engine here, I can more realistically understand. And I'm not even sure. We've never actually seen anything in Frostbite, that has RTGI enabled, have we?
I don't think so.
Can you think of anything? It's been Reflections and RTAO and such, but nothing really beyond that. So, I can kind of see why it's not there, but you're right. As interior spaces, especially looking at Jack Fragg's gameplay here, that's definitely one limitation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But we're hugely excited by it. So, let's just wait and see what happens next. Can't wait to go hands on.